So, Brian, just so you know, the episode with Tim took about 2 hours. I don't know how or why. I didn't think this 2.5. Yeah. I had to I cut down parts at the very beginning and end. I didn't think this many questions would take that much time, but to me, that's pretty dang cool that we can get that good a conversation from right now that we're at 19 questions.
Tim's passionate too, you know?
Yeah.
And you're not?
Well, you know.
So if this is only an hour long, then I'm just not going to recommend you at all. I'm sorry.
That's right.
I have to go with
another litmus.
We shall throw brevity to the wind then.
Yes.
That was a great podcast. I mean, Tim is really passionate about what he does. So my only complaint was the fact that I wasn't going to bed until 1 o'clock in the morning, but I could stand it. It was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a great episode. I wound up signing up for one of his classes right afterwards, and I'm going next weekend.
Awesome.
Not bad.
Good for you.
I did laugh when I looked back and I was like, remember when Matt said, do you want to do the first episode right now? I have somebody waiting. And I was like, yeah, let's do it right now. That shouldn't take that long. Yeah, thank God that Tessah was like, I don't want to do it right now.
I had to keep Tessah's look at the very end of episode 0. Just like, wait, what? What?
I don't hide my feelings well.
No, that's good. So, question 1. Now that we're ready, who inspires you and who are and were your role models? And this, of course, goes to Brian.
Well, that's easy to answer. My original role model was Kwajin Kang, because I grew up in a very dysfunctional house with 2 parents that had a lot of mental health issues and had abandoned other children. And of course, they decided to keep me. And I saw this dude who was peaceful, but could handle business at the same time. And I thought, boy, that's what I want to do. So it started a lifelong journey on martial arts. And that got me started in a great path and led me to teaching almost instantaneously in my career. So that was really good. As far as the firearms industry, I had the rare privilege of Claude Warner was our roommate for about 2 or 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so Claude and I got to discuss in great detail teaching methodologies. And Claude has a unique background because he taught at Rogers. So teaching 5 days a week and teaching some of the top shooters in the country at the same time, but the same curriculum over and over gives him a rare insight that doesn't exist for most firearms instructors because of the quantity he did. And then if you've read Claude's work or you listen to him, he has a very penetrating and keen mind. So it was very interesting. It was like Mr. Logic meets Mr. Intuition. The Zen warrior meets the special forces logic guy. So it worked really well. I'm very grateful every day for the amount of conversation that we had about training. Of course, Scott Jelinski has been a big influence in my life. Scott is one of my close friends. I work as an adjunct instructor with him. I go on the road and teach, and he has done everything he can to help me grow as instructor, further my career. And, I don't think anybody's teaching as much as Scott is right now. He's at 100 classes a year, and that is an unfathomable number of classes to teach. It means 2 days during the week, 2 days on the weekend, and, only about 2 weeks a year off. So he is working hard, and he has really developed something, and he's developed me as a shooter. He's really helped me develop as a shooter and as a good coach. And then I'm going to name somebody nobody knows, but his name was Sean Brogan, and he gave me an apprenticeship. He didn't know he was giving me one. I talked him into teaching full time, and then I insinuated myself as an assistant instructor. And I spent about 5 or 6 years working for free on weekends every time he taught. And he taught pistol, carbine, and precision rifle. He had a big background in the Marine Corps with some counterterrorism work. So he was a very competent instructor, but he was also an agile manager in his real life for a corporation, for a German corporation. So he had a unique management skills. So it was really interesting, the guys that have influenced me tremendously. I've had some great coaches in my life, like, one of my first jiu-jitsu coaches, not my full-time coach. I didn't train under him. I'm not insinuating that. I took many seminars from him. It was Hickson Gracie. That was my first real jiu-jitsu lesson. A buddy called and said, "Hey, I got a jiu-jitsu guy coming in." In the 90s, there was no jiu-jitsu belts anywhere. A blue belt was a huge deal in 93 or 94. And my first lesson was a 3-day seminar, which lasted about 10 or 11 hours a day with Rickson Gracie. And he's probably one of the most masterful instructors I've ever seen. So he taught both sides of everything. He greeted everybody. He called everybody by their first name. There were 50 of us. And at the end of the seminar, he fought all 50 of us and beat us easily, which is a very wonderful experience to see a master level instructor just show you how good he was at what he did. But it was a big moment, changed a lot. And there's many other I could name. And I'm going to say one that's really important is every day my wife inspires me to be a better man. It's the best choice I ever made. I am a man born of chaos, and she is a good person. She's full of light, caring, and she makes me work harder to be a better man each day. So it's really an important part of my life.
That's great stuff. Though when you said about the master sparring with the students, could you imagine being done with a pistol class and now you're going to get into a gunfight with the
Simunitions only, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Now, did he fight all 50 of you at once?
That's right.
Yeah. No.
All right.
But back to back is pretty amazing.
Yeah, back to back is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That's cool. That is cool. So with all that experience, we've discussed it already, the importance of being the perpetual student. What do you personally look for in an instructor?
For me, in an instructor, of course, technical expertise is really important. And you can recognize competence in a human being instantaneously. Like in law enforcement, we know about the deadly triad. When someone is slovenly in appearance, they lack a command presence, and they have a poor attention to detail, they're very likely to be killed in the line of duty. Those are things that give us competence. A person that carries himself with the correct posture, that understands his job, pays attention to details is, of course, very important. What I really look for in coaches, though, is somebody who wants to help me succeed, that has my best interest at heart. So it's not their show, it's our show. And they are really working to do that. So like you guys had Tim Herron on, he exemplifies a world-class technician with the passion to teach people. And really, all he cares about is you getting better. Yeah. I never get any other feed from him than just, how can I help you get better? And I'm going to go take him in AJ's class in Arizona in November. So I'm excited about that. But that's what I look for in an instructor. And it's funny, when you're ready to learn something, the weird thing about life, as soon as you open that door, and Tessah just went through this on the last show, is when you need that instructor, he shows up and it's time to go. So the biggest thing I've learned to say with looking for instructors is whoever shows up and I recognize it, I have to say yes then, because I may never get another chance to train with them. Yeah. Life is tough. It changes quickly. And so I've had some really unusual instructors enter my life out of nowhere, and have changed my life completely. Like the guy named Sean Brogan, he came to my jiu-jitsu school. I asked him about his t-shirt because he's wearing a tactical t-shirt. He says, "Oh, I do a little shooting." And he ran an impromptu training class. And I went, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen." And then I pushed him into teaching as much as he could. And I got an apprenticeship out of it. So, that's what I look for, is somebody who's willing and able to help me. Somebody has the technical competence. And I'll say the final thing is they have to be good with people. Yeah. They really need to. I can learn from somebody who's not, but it's much more difficult. And, it's happened recently to somebody I care about, is an instructor damaged that person by not adapting and talking to that person in a way he should. And he didn't mean to be cruel, but he was cruel. And it actually influenced a person to maybe stop doing any more training. And that's a horrifying situation. And then not to recognize that in yourself, or not to care enough to change that, it really discounts me from training with you in the future.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What you said also about training with various people. And I remember when Pat Rogers passed, how many people said, "Man, I had the opportunity. Yeah. I kept on putting it off, and then it was too late." So much truth to that.
It's a short window, guys. As far as education goes, it's really strange. It was fun watching Tim invite you to class. It was a wonderful moment. And I was like, I really hope she does that because, I'm older and I know this, the doors open and close really quickly. And you're always going to regret what you say no to more than what you say yes to.
Amen.
Yeah. And just to go back a little bit, I really love what you said, because it hits home with me as well about being good with people just in general. I've also pushed some people to attend this or that training, and they go, and afterwards I ask them what they thought, and they go, well, it was okay, but the instructor didn't really pay attention to me because, I wasn't as skilled as other people, or I wasn't as talkative, or I was less confident. And I feel like it's discouraging when that happens. And I think that a big part of instructing and teaching is making sure that you are helping your students to feel confident enough where they can come out of their shell a little bit. So yeah, that kind of hits home with me as well.
You're right. The burden's on us, not you.
Right.
I stand in front of the entrance and make sure I greet each person as they come in. I introduce myself. I ask them where they're from, and I just get to meet them and get a feel for them, and they get a feel for me. And it starts the relationship. There's nothing like having somebody interested enough to actually greet you when you come into class. So I think, that's something that Hickson Gracie did. He came out, he introduced himself, he used his first name. And, back then martial arts was really regulated instructor. Now, it was a very weird thing to have an instructor introduce himself with his first name. And it taught me a huge lesson that, even if I don't feel comfortable, because let's face it, a lot of really good instructors are introverted by nature. They're technically competent, but they don't feel good in crowds sometimes. And they don't reach out the way they should. And Tim was talking about how extroverted he was. I'm not. I'm introverted by heart, but my profession has made me an extrovert. And I just practice what I'm weak at. And I remember going to classes and feeling like, man, I just paid a bunch of money and nobody recognized me. Nobody said hello. Nobody really cared about the progress. I got to see the show, and then I left. And, that's something I don't want to recreate. And I want to have a relationship with the person after the class so that when we see each other, I recognize them. I remember them. They could reach out to me if they needed more help. And the only way to do that is to start off really strong and make sure that they know that they're important. And this class is about them, not about me.
As I think back to the various classes I've been to, especially the ones that were much more impactful in my life, not that it was necessarily the content was groundbreaking, but the things that I picked up and that the instructors themselves were much more impactful. It seemed every one of those classes, I stayed in contact with those instructors, and they were always a good resource for me, and vice versa. They could call on me if they ever needed anything, and I could call on them. And that was a huge thing for me. Still is.
And it's just good leadership.
Yeah.
When you lead people, that's how you do it. You connect with them. And the old saying of being a king, you in the old days of medieval days, the king was the given sacrifice. Your authority and the weight that you bared and the decisions you made meant you were sacrificing yourself for your people. And I think that's an important part of leadership. It's not nearly as dramatic as medieval kings, but the given sacrifice is you giving your energy, making a connection and showing and leading the way to do that instead of making the student come to you. They've already made a huge commitment and investment. I don't know what more they could than time and money and spending a weekend with you. And it's an incredible honor at that point to be able to teach. And the sooner we make a connection, the better we do.
Yeah. So what inspired you to become an instructor?
I don't know if inspiration was part of it. I started martial arts when I was 14 out of sheer necessity, living in a chaotic environment, having no real structure, not knowing how to do things. I started raising myself by reading comic books, and I wanted to be a superhero. By the time I was 13, I was running a superhero training class in my backyard. Very, very geeky, nerdy stuff, but it worked for me. I started taking classes, and I wouldn't leave. I had nowhere to go. Home wasn't a good place. So I stayed 6-7 hours a day at the gym and worked out. And eventually an opportunity came along to teach because it was part of the training. It wasn't a paying situation. They just said, "Hey, can you help with class?" And I never hesitated. I said yes. And I don't remember it being a choice. It was a necessity because I didn't want anybody to go through what I was going through and be left without somebody to help them. And that's what I see teaching as a service, to help people who are looking for structure in their life and structuring themselves and understanding how they make decisions and how they can progress and how they can become better at whatever they want to do. And that's really what led me into it. By the time I was 20, I was leading a Taekwondo school that had 300 students in it, because my instructor recognized that I was teaching well, I was building a good curriculum, and he just didn't want to do the work. So he left me to it. And what an experimental base that was. 300 people was a lot. It was a huge deal. And it was the main headquarters out of 11 schools. And then I ended up running testing, and I was building coaches by the time I was 23 or 24. I got in a horrible accident, almost lost my leg, got hit by a car on my motorcycle, and really messed me up pretty bad, which reaffirmed how important it was for me to help people as quickly as I could. So whether it was a passion or a truth, this is what I'm supposed to do. I have no doubt in my life, this is the only thing I was put on earth to do. And I have done it every day. And I have run a business on my own, and I have found a pathway. And some days I taught 12, 13 hours a day. So that's how much I love it. Now, I don't always like it. There's a difference. You have days that are tough. We're in the middle of a legal battle for our range. It's not much fun, but I love teaching, and I will always love teaching, and I will always find a way to do it, because it doesn't matter what thing I get involved with, I become a teacher at it, because I don't want anybody to be left without a good guide, without a good advocate. And that's what I call myself, as an advocate for your success.
Cool. I don't know if you're a fan of Jerry Seinfeld, but I think he had some quote from his stand-up routine, something about that all guys have in the back of their mind. I don't know. I don't remember if it's their B plan or what, but it's to be a superhero.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just makes sense that's how you started.
I was running around with a garbage can lid thinking I was Captain America.
That's right.
And it was awesome. Hey, but what are Marvel superheroes are nothing more than Greek tragedies, which is the tale of facing what you fear and becoming a man or a woman that can face challenges, which is what a warrior was. So, I've always had a big call to that, because I came out of a very dark place. And I think that's why men and women are gravitating to that. And first responders have this story over and over again. They usually come out of a bad childhood, or they have a bit of problems. And then you either have a choice. You're going to be a protector or a perpetrator. And I certainly wasn't going to do what my parents did. So I made a different choice.
I like it that you use the word guide there. I don't want anyone to be left without a guide. And something that I've just noticed in, starting to get into classes, and just seeing what kind of instructors are out there, is that not all of them are great, and that not everyone should become an instructor, because it is, for lack of a better term, it's a really high calling. Like your students are showing up to your classes, and if they paid money to come to a class and again took out a weekend, they probably look up to you in some way, and they expect good information from you. And I think it's important to note, and as a student, to be aware of, going into a class, you do kind of look up to that person. And I guess at the end of that, not everyone should be instructors.
True.
Because you're a guide. You're not just an instructor. There's more to it than that.
You really have to take yourself out of the teaching. That's a really important part of it that people miss. I have to take my personality out of what I do and what I think is happening and what I want to happen. And I have to cue in on what the other person needs. I often say this, but teaching is something outside of me. it feels like it happens without my actually being involved with it sometimes. And any high level performer anywhere is going to understand this, is there's a connection that's deep. And we have 5 chemicals that allow us to perform at this level. So when I get to teach, I get to be part of something bigger, and that's your team. And that's how I always want to be. And it's a wonderful experience. It gives me enthusiasm and passion to get up and practice my craft every day.
So we discussed this in a previous episode, but what do you consider to be your specialty, and how are you different from other instructors?
Well, I keep changing my specialty over the years. And it's funny, we either get defined by what we do technically. So, are you a martial arts instructor? Are you a red dot pistol instructor? Are you a carbine instructor? So then you get termed a firearms instructor. And I've never taught a firearm. I teach people. And what I've recognized is, as such a generalist that has spent so much time training in so many diverse martial environments, I jokingly call myself a high priest in the Temple of Mars, because I've moved through everything: unarmed combat, sticks, knives, guns, pistols, rifles. I've gone through it all. But the same thing that always comes up is I'm really good at coaching. I'm good at understanding how people learn, and I'm really good at understanding how people make decisions. And that's really my specialty. Now, I use the red dot pistol to do that because it's a great teaching tool. And people love to shoot. Shooting's fun. And that's the first part of getting people to class, is something that they're going to enjoy. But jiu-jitsu is fun, and rifles are fun. And then whatever specialty we get into, I think the best thing I'm at is communication skills with people, understanding their psychology. I spend more time on how a shooter works than how the bad guy works, although it's not a separate subject. And that is really the specialty that I moved in. And I'm going to open a new chapter in my life next year. I'm going to introduce a class on pure coaching methodology and it'll be technically agnostic, which is hard to do, but it'll be a way to defer from that to help people recognize this, because it's taken me a lifelong pursuit of understanding what I do, from reading body language to interpreting words, to watching learning styles, to talking to people, to understanding how they connect, to understanding how the brain works at a deep level, how to create unconscious competence, and how to build better coaches in the future. So I think that's my specialty, which is a very vague and general thing, but it's hard. People want you to be a pistol instructor. They want you to be a rifle instructor. And sometimes you're just not that. But you need to be, because otherwise they don't know what class to come to.
I think that's somewhat understandable, though, just from listening to you talk a little bit, because you are passionate about a wide range of things pertaining to defense. So I understand why it probably feels difficult for you to hone in on one thing, because there are so many different aspects to it, and all of them have a lot of information within them. So I'm kind of the same way, just in the extremely early stages of brainstorming about what I would want to instruct about. And I mean, I can rattle off 50 different things in my head, and it seems like none of them would really fit into the same class. So,
well, it doesn't get better with age. I'll tell you that. If you're a curious, passionate person, you're still going to be the same way as you get older, and I just, whatever interests me and moves me is the direction I go. So, it's led to a lot of curious things that have come together to help teaching. So it's always about teaching.
The great thing about it is that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, the great thing about it is that really sets you apart, and it gives you a really unique perspective and a unique place to speak from. Like when you're giving advice or you're teaching a specific thing, you have a lot of diversity to back it up. And I imagine that also can play into context and all of those things when you're teaching.
I've seen a lot of different people too. That's really the key. Teaching martial arts classes, especially, it's a 6-day-a-week function. And, there were at least, 7, 8 classes a day and it's filled with different people. And I always say the good mark of a very high level coach is that they bring people to their classes that don't look like them. So if everybody in my class looks like me, is the same size, has the same beard, walks the same way, I'm only teaching to a very narrow segment. But if I have a wide group of people, that means that I can spread my message to very different people, different genders, different sizes, different physicalities. You were at Active Self-Protection Conference this year. I don't know if you met Scars, the guy that has the arthritis so bad.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he has juvenile arthritis. He's just torn up. He's had so many surgeries, and he was in somebody's class.
Yes, I did.
Yes. And really cool guy, but a real nightmare for an instructor because he can't do any of the things that we ask. So when I saw him, I saw the exact opposite. I was like, here's a chance for me as a lifelong instructor to reach out to somebody. So when we took a break, I went over and got him. And then we worked on grip, but I didn't tell him what to do. I asked him a lot of questions. I had him squeeze my hands. I had him stand. I had him move. We went through the range of motion of what he was capable of. And then we started working a little bit. And in 10 minutes, a guy who can't straighten both arms and has a hard time, and he's on the internet, he's very vocal about all this, was putting rounds in a 1-inch square at 5 yards. But it's his courage that allowed us to have that moment, And I just had to recognize that and I looked at it as, man, this is an opportunity to diversify as a coach, to reach somebody new and to have a chance. And he needed that. He needed somebody to reach out to him. And all the coaches did a great job at the conference with that. But it's a cool moment, and that's something some people might shy away from because they just don't look like him. They don't know how he works. They don't know how much pain he's in, and they're afraid to do or say the wrong thing.
So next, what qualifications or skills should an instructor possess?
All right, so this is an easy one for me. I break it down into 4 qualifications. They will not sound like anything anybody else says. The first one is you must be an engaging speaker, because that's the very first thing an instructor does is start to talk, and we have to capture people as instantly as we can. And it takes a lot of practice to learn how to speak. It takes a lot of time to keep your thoughts moving in a fluid manner. And it's very hard to hold the goal of what you're saying is. Even here during this discussion, I take notes when I can, and I refer to them, and I think about what we're going to talk about, because it helps me frame a structure. And that way I don't just flow off into what I think is interesting in a moment. So I think being an engaging speaker is really important. And that's something I see really lacking in the firearms department. Some people can tell engaging stories, but they're not capturing people. If you look at TED Talks, which is a great ability to watch speakers of different subjects, they found that the speakers that were rated the highest were always showing their hands like this. And they did it almost 4 to 1. Compared to the people who were rated lowest. Now, it's interesting in law enforcement, we always want to see the person's hands because it shows us what? That they're not yes. So as a speaker, what are you doing also when you talk and you do this? You're making your audience comfortable. Your body language matches your words. And then people have already made an assessment, and if I talk like this or I talk like this, I'm putting tension. If you watch politicians when they're trying to sell you something you don't want, they squeeze their fingers together to try to give it to you. So understanding your body language while you're speaking and being an engaging speaker is really, really, really important. Structuring your ideas so that they come out, having a lot of words that paint or evoke an image. And that's the reason that I use the words that I do, because I really thought deeply about it, because I want to paint a picture in your mind. Like when I watch Evan listen to me talk, he doesn't look at me. He's thinking about the words I'm saying, and he's painting a visual in his mind. And then I watch Tessah, and she makes good eye contact. She wants to watch my body language. So what if I'm not good at either one of those things, or I'm only good at one? I've lost both of them pretty quickly. And so I think being an engaging speaker is really important. Technical competence is always important. But the level of technical competence, you need to be very good and very proficient at a lot of things. So let's take pistol shooting. I can't just be the best competitor with one gun in the class. So I've only shot Glocks my whole life, and I only understand striker fires. Well, the whole world has changed. Glock 10 years ago was the only thing in my class. And now what do I see? Berettas, CZs, staccatos, and they're all different platforms. And I have to understand how to shoot those. So as a coach, I'm really focused internally on a narrow focus of skill sets to build that. But I need to understand that. And then I get people with all different sizes of guns and different sizes of hands and different manuals of arms. So I have to understand how all that works. So that technical competence is broad. And then what is acceptable to the style of shooting you're teaching. So my specialty is the armed citizen from concealment, although it plays into other areas. And my goal, therefore, is we have to have a good, robust draw. We have to be able to make good first round hits, and we have to understand when to use force in the appropriate amount. So my goals will always reflect that. So technical competence for that. The other thing is a high level of EQ. Can you manage people? Because as a teacher, you're going to meet people that have high level of arousal and low level of arousal. So sometimes they're not wanting to perform. They don't want to pressure. They want to hold back. They're going to drift towards the back of the class and keep away from you. Some people can't wait to get started. They can't stand still, but they're very excited. So for me to recognize how to either raise your level or lower your level is essential. One of the few people I've seen do an exceptional job of this, but he teaches the hardest curriculum, is Craig Douglas. He's very good at keeping people involved at the right level. We know about a 4% arousal level versus skills is what we need as coaches. So I need you slightly above your skill level to really engage and learn. But if I put you past that, you're going to really burn out really quick. And if I put you under that, you're going to feel under challenged. So I think the EQ part is underrated. How do we manage people? How do we manage their emotions? A lot of us don't like to think about that, but sounds a lot like police work, doesn't it, Matt? And that's why a lot of police are sometimes very good instructors, like Craig, is they had to manage undercover work. He had to constantly adapt. The last thing is the ability to adapt under pressure, because the class will change no matter what you do. You must be able to adapt under pressure. And if you can't problem solve quickly in an adaptive manner, you're going to lose students to the curriculum. You're just going to be teaching a test or a patch or a set of words, but you're not going to keep them. You'll have to adapt very quickly. So it's very important to practice problem-solving skills as a coach constantly and to do it very quickly. It's an intuitive nature. You really have to build the intuitive side, which is the gift. Logic's the servant, as Einstein said. So you have to be intuitively quick to grasp what can I do to improve this situation and be willing to change. Because a lot of us are, pedantic. When we start doing something, that's how we do it. You see the knife hand came out. Y'all see that? That's it. But I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to force you to do it. And sometimes as a coach, you have to learn very quickly that that's not the right way to go, because you're creating an adversary instead of somebody to coach. And if we can work together and figure it out. So my adaptive mechanism is to be a very good question asker of my clients. All right. Hey, what did you see? What did you feel? Can you replay it in your mind? So it gives me some idea what's going on. So I think those skills are really important. You should go to classes. I've been to every certification there is, from Force Science Institute to Range Master, Scott's classes, Masada Yube's classes, because I love to learn. I wasn't a particularly good student in high school, but once it became self-directed and autonomous, then I found my passion for it. And I think it's important to do that, but those classes will not make you an instructor. They will give you the knowledge base or a curriculum development for you. And I would say the final thing as far as skills and abilities is be healthy enough to teach at a high level of energy. Take care of yourself, sleep, eat well, because you owe your clients the best you every time you show up at the range. And Lord knows when I was younger, I made a lot of mistakes in that area, but getting a good night's sleep, being ready, being prepared. If you ever see me teach a class, you're going to see me show up at least an hour early and rehearse the curriculum so that I'm ready to go, because that gives me confidence. I'm prepared, and then I can adapt and I can manage people and I can talk without thinking about it. I can refer to my notes and I'll have a lot of structure in it. So those are the things I think are important.
That's a good list.
Yeah.
Yeah, one that really sticks out to me is high level of EQ. And when you mentioned it at first, I was a little confused, but then when you explained it, I thought to myself, I've seen both. I've seen both extremes of that, where I've been to classes where the instructor had it so basic that I even tuned out, and then he was really doing nothing to remedy it. And I even asked him, hey, maybe just, for me or students that feel comfortable, could we do this? And, the answer is no, we can't. And it really makes you tune out. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've been in a class where one of the students that was there, I don't think he realized that it was above what his comfortable skill level was. And he basically told the instructor, I think I'm going to have to leave because I just don't think that I'm ready for this. And the instructor told him no and tailored the rest of his time, specifically for him. And he still improved a lot during the class. So yeah, that's huge. And also being healthy enough to teach is a big one too, because I think, we've all seen at least one instructor that was either too tired, too overweight, or something to really teach effectively. And it almost felt like the instructor was trying to keep up with the class instead of the opposite.
That should be the opposite.
Mm-hmm. You got to lead by example. That's the real purpose of this. If I can't shoot well, and then I don't have enough energy to defend myself, what am I teaching? Why am I here? Where's the example of discipline? And discipline has a bad meaning to a lot of people, but it means to learn. So I'm setting a physical example of, I'm 56 years old now, and everybody's surprised when they hear my age because, of course, Chinese magic with all the martial arts, we stay younger, right? But it's because I've always prioritized being healthy, because I worked around people that weren't. I see what it is. And it's not the quantity of life I want to improve, it's the quality. And in order to be able to keep up with this rage to master and this passion I have, I got to have a lot of energy, so I got to get up and train in the morning. I got to lift weights. I've got to work on, curriculum development. I've got to write. I've got to do podcasts. I got to do everything. So, how am I going to do that if I don't feel good, and it's a big part of it.
But it's one that I think a lot of people don't note, are not keenly aware of or paying attention to until they're in the middle of it and they're realizing that they're falling behind. They're not ready or prepared.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree.
So at what point did you find your ability was good enough to teach it?
As soon as the opportunity was there for me, I had trained with a guy privately in martial arts, but I always looked older because apparently all my ancestors were hairy. So the hair came on the face pretty early. I had a job when I was 15. I was working at a Kmart, and this guy came in and asked me about a heavy bag, but he wanted it without any weight in it. I was like, what do you do? He goes, I teach martial arts. And I couldn't sign up anywhere, and my parents weren't going to sign up or pay for it. And minimum wage was about $2.35 then. So we made $2.35 an hour. This guy taught private lessons. Each lesson cost me $15 an hour. So roughly 7 hours of work in order to take these. And I took 3 lessons a week, so that's, I started teaching, and then he had some problems. So I moved to another gym, and they asked me, but I also volunteered every chance I got. Hey, you want me to work with the white belts? Do you want me to help somebody? And it wasn't if I was ready, because I don't think you ever feel ready, to be honest. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life, and sometimes I feel under ready to do it. But, this is the way the universe works. If you're there and somebody needs help, you're the one that's volunteering. Otherwise, you're just watching life go by. You're the bystander. And if you make a mistake, it's okay, as long as you don't come at them and say, I know everything, and keep yourself humble and be willing to try. It doesn't matter what level you start teaching, then you can help anybody. And teaching is different than doing, because you're the observer. So as the observer, you must look for what's absent or what doesn't fit, which is a very simple skill. You're not teaching them a methodology to do it. Sometimes you're just looking to see if they're missing something or there's something you recognize with them. And you have to divorce it, because everybody wants to teach their hardest lesson, whatever it is. If they had a hard time with trigger management, their whole class is about trigger management. If they had a hard time with grip, they're going to teach grip because they had to really think about it. But the good teacher does this. They look at the student and they see what's missing, and then they offer that to them, and as much as they can, but it's in a very, supportive way of, how's, I noticed when you did this, and I got to tell you, the camera now is probably the easiest teacher in the world. You can simply film somebody and let them do it. But if you want to teach, find something to teach and start teaching, because there's lots of low level teaching to start with. And then I may be too soon to say this, but you need to be in an apprenticeship when you teach. You need to find a master level instructor or a very good instructor, and you need to follow them around and ask them questions and volunteer to help them. Carry targets for them, do whatever you need to. Whenever they come into town, establish a relationship with them, because in a guild in the old days, if you wanted to become a master craftsman, you joined it and you had a bunch of master instructors that watched you and helped guide you. And I think it's really missing in the firearms development side. 2 days does not make you an instructor. Just like 2 days of CrossFit training doesn't make you a exercise and physiology coach. It's a very different problem. So you need time with somebody who's good. And what they can help you do is shortcut the mistakes, give you the examples, and also give you the opportunity in bite-sized bits that you can handle. Because new instructors get overwhelmed and they need smaller tasks. So they start getting confident, and then they should help you grow. They should encourage you to grow by challenging you, asking you questions, and then also allowing you to teach when it's your chance, and congratulating you when you do a good job, because we got to build that victory every time we can with instructors.
So then what's your secret to creating your lesson plans?
It's always the clients. It's always the clients. So, it's funny, like this year, I think I've learned more about teaching than I ever have, because we're talking about teaching constantly. And what I've realized is there's always an unintended consequence to my lesson. That doesn't mean it's bad, but there's always an unintended consequence. So I'll give you, for instance, the drill where you do the compressed surprise trigger break. Nobody's surprised by it, but you prep the trigger, and then I hit the beeper and you fire a shot. We measure your reaction time. And I do that quite frequently in class because we need some numbers to know how you work. Some people tend to be about a 0.2 reaction time. And then some people are geared really high and it's 0.1 or even lower. You can't even measure it. They can react so quick. So it's an interesting drill to start knowing, is this a speed athlete or not? Because a lot of people tell me they're accuracy first and they turn into speed athletes as soon as I put pressure on them. So I need to source that out. But here's the unintended consequence. Everybody started shooting better groups while they were doing this. So I was having a hell of a time zeroing red dots because, all guns are zeroed somewhere. We just don't know where. So we're trying to get 10-yard groups. So I started having them do surprise trigger breaks at 10 yards. And I noticed the groups shrunk almost 50%. And we started seeing 1 or 2 inch groups. And the reason that it worked was it divorced them from the process. And all they wanted to do was beat the buzzer. So they were no longer thinking about the consequence of the future or the mistake made in the past. So I learned more as an instructor observing them, which changed my curriculum. So my curriculum is guided by my goal. Goal is the arms, as I said before, the armed citizen. The draw is important. Accuracy and efficiency is important, and understanding when to use force is really important. So I tailor my curriculum around it. But as I teach, I watch how people react to it, and I measure their progress constantly. I measure with the timer. I keep stats on it. I have them shoot different drills. And it's amazing when you're open to it. And if you just watch, weird stuff happens while you're teaching, and it changes your curriculum. It should change it forever. I'll actually stop in class and take notes on what just happened so that I remember it. And that keeps my curriculum living. It's always alive, and it has to be changing. So if you train with me a year ago, you'll recognize the structure maybe, but it may be different what I taught, because I'm learning as an instructor, and I'm learning a lot of shortcuts to get people through it. I'm learning a lot of different ways to do things. So the curriculum needs to be living. Now, we all need to learn fundamentals. That's important, but I think we get caught up in specificity and too much detail on the things that we love. The best advice I ever got from an instructor was look for things in common instead of the things that are different. So like for me, when I teach, sights and trigger, they're together. Doesn't make any sense to look at sights if you're not shooting, because you're aiming without shooting. And if you're shooting without looking at your sights, doesn't make any sense to me either. So those two things live together forever. So does grip and postural stability. I don't say stance. Stance is an end result of pointing your feet in a different direction. So it's not a good coaching methodology to say stance. What we're trying to achieve is postural stability, which exists whether we're standing still or moving. And you don't grip the gun with your hands, you grip the gun with your body. We have 625 muscles. They're in paired opposites, and we have to learn which ones to use. So like if I throw a right cross, I use 126 muscles because I had to write a paper on it. So I might as well use that number on somebody. It's a little ridiculous, but I have to know how those sequence. And I need to have a balance between tension and relaxation, which we call it as tone. A good athlete has tone. So why teach grip and postural stability is separate? Because stability in the pistol comes from the shoulders, not the hands. If it's not flying out of your hands, you've probably got a good grip. Your stability comes in the back of the shoulders. That's really important. And then if you lean forward or you lean back, you're going to see stringing. If your feet are pointed out, you're going to bleed energy to the right or left. So I've got to look at the posture and the grip, and they just all become one thing. And then the overriding fundamental is process, not follow through. Follow through is an archaic archery term, which was important in archery. If any of you ever shot a bow, that arrow has to cross across the bow, so you had to hold still. And the word, when you miss, the word sin means to miss your mark. It's an archery term, not a religious term. So whenever you sin, it means you missed your mark. So the idea of standing still and holding was really important. Well, when we shoot pistols, man, that pistol reacts pretty quick. We're not going to stand there and hold it. We're not following through. We're actually staying involved in the process. And if we don't teach people to concentrate during the process and observe the whole process, then we're teaching them it stops and it starts, it stops and it starts, much like their concentration, and they simply check out really quick. So the more things I can put together and make them in common and then pull them together with outside ideas, like most people think linearly when they make a curriculum, this goes to this goes to this, but it's just as important to go in a transverse manner sideways and pick up ideas. So the first thing I ask somebody is what they do. I did it with Evan today. So I can make a connection to what he does. He already has a certain level of skill at something in his life. Tessah does too. Matt does too. So if I can make the connection to that and I can say, hey, listen, it's a lot like this. They already have all those hooks in their mind and now they can hang something off of it and they don't have to learn anything new. It makes life simple. So it's an interesting way to teach and it's hard because it puts all the responsibility on me to be proactive constantly.
And this really just goes back to a common theme that we've been talking about for a while, which, Matt, I think you just posted something about it earlier today, which is that a good instructor is always a teacher always a learner. And I just think it's wild how you even said that during your own classes, half the time you are stopping to take notes. You are learning even while you are teaching, which is awesome. I mean, what better time to think, what better time to learn more about how you want to structure your courses than when you're teaching them. You get that live feedback of what works, what doesn't, what do I need to change.
What's the goal too? Success. So if I see something that's successful, what do I need to do? I need to capture that and hold on to it so I can recreate it and see if it's really something, instead of just doing the same thing over and over. In martial arts, we're really bad about that. Whoever founds the art is named after him. If it was in America, it'd be called Brian Hill Way, which, doesn't sound very important compared to the martial arts systems. And then I die. And then my head instructor interprets it. Now, he spent a whole lifetime with me and he knows what I was about and he has a lot of fighting experience, but he only gives about half that knowledge to the other guy that comes after him. And then he starts interpreting this whole structure that I created as something more or less than it is and how important it is. And now it's starting to die. We're on the third generation. By the fourth generation, they have a quarter of the experience They have no reason to know why I taught any of that stuff, but they're still teaching the same thing over and over. And I know Matt's going to shake his head because this sounds a lot like law enforcement training. It becomes devoid of the lesson and what actually led to the success, and becomes its own dogma or doctrine all by itself. So the universe will continually provide lessons for us as we interact as student and teacher. And the Japanese have a great term for this. It's called giri and on, which means duty and honor, and they work together. So it's my duty to teach, and it is my honor to teach, and vice versa. It's your duty as a student to learn, but it's your honor to learn, and it's going to switch roles constantly. We're never going to be totally in charge or against or working with each other. We're both going to be learning the whole time. And the word sensei in Japanese means one who's gone before. Doesn't mean teacher. It means one who's gone before. So I've hiked this mountain. I got some shortcuts, but you still have to hike the mountain. And when we hike it together, it's going to look different than when I did it. So I think it's really interesting. I'm glad you cued on that, Evan. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So when it comes time to put those courses together and put them out there to have students come out and take your classes, how are you generating interest for your courses, or what aspects help generate interest?
Well, streamlining your message and having a curriculum that leads to success is really important. I'm very fortunate. My wife is a very good marketer. And you'll see this reoccurring theme that happens to all the instructors like Scott and myself. Our wives are really involved in the business. She is really good at generating interest to that, much better than I would be, because, let's face it, I'm as close to Kwajin Kang as a modern man could be. I like to train. I like to spend time on the range, which means I don't know how to promote myself very well. I believe humility is important, which is the opposite of promotion sometimes. I'm prone to give away all my lessons, and that's not a very good way to run a business or to promote it. So we talk, and when she tells me to do something and says, I think this is a good idea and we needed to go that direction, I simply submit to the discipline of learning and listen to her at that point and help develop it. So have a clear message, do as much as you can. Just like doing this podcast. I don't know who I'm reaching right now, but here we are on the East Coast, sitting out here at 11:30 at night. I'm outside. We're building a house. We're living out of our RV, but this is important. So do it for the business. It's important. Generate that interest. Try to find groups of people like primary and secondary where you can interact and become a part of that and get to know people. Create connections wherever you go, because you just don't know what's going to lead to. This year I did 6 conferences, and most people don't know this, but for most conferences, especially like Active Self-Protection, it's a charity event. So we're donating our time, and it's not just your time, but that's a weekend out of the year I could teach. But it's for kids that get pushed out of the adoption system and don't have anywhere to go and end up being homeless. So how can I say no? But the unintended consequence of that is I met wonderful people, and I've had 4 hosting opportunities come out of that because I took the weekend to do that. I went to Matt's event just to meet people that were a different group. I'm involved as many groups as I can in shooting. I take other people's classes, AJ and Tim Heron next month, Craig Douglas last month, so that I make these connections. And then when I interact with somebody online, I try to have decorum with it. I try to turn them by talking to them as 2 respected people would talk to each other. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But other people are watching the way you act. And that's how you create interest in what you're doing. And they notice who you are. And I can't tell you how many people have said, hey, listen, I've been stalking you, watching what you say and do. So every moment of your life, if you're going to be an instructor and you interact in a public venue, it matters. And that's how you create interest to it. How you conduct yourself, how you speak to people, the interest you generate, the videos. I do a video every week, just talking on my coaching, and I share it with people. And because, listen, I can't give away my curriculum, but I can. There's nothing stopping it because my curriculum is growing and evolving. And one of the greatest jiu-jitsu instructors in the world films every one of his classes and invites his competitors to watch to see if they can beat him at his own game. That kind of, I'm not afraid of you learning what I have to teach, because if you get good at it and I get good at it, what happens next? I got to get even better at it, and it's going to create growth. So it's that growth mindset that we're always growing. We weren't born a certain way. We're not fixed. We're going to grow and challenge ourselves. And the best way I can do that is find somebody who's as good as I am or better than I am, share information with them. And we're going to grow really quick. We'll generate interest, and people love that, man. When they come to class and they're like, man, your class is really growing and it's interested. And I notice there's an instructor in here and you spent time talking to him. That's the way to grow your stuff. Now, at a very low level, when I first started, I really got close to my local gun store that had a range in it. Shelly and I would show up with coffee and donuts for the staff. We invited them to come to classes for free. We created a stellar relationship with them because they're the first person to talk to the new gun owner. Now, they have their own instructors there, but I help train their own instructors. And who do you think they refer to in the next step? That local gun range. And it's a hard sell. People don't like it sometimes, but that's important because I still have a fantastic relationship with them because they're right in my backyard. And I really grew the business by making sure I spent time with them and created a relationship with them instead of just saying, oh, they don't know what they're doing and I'm a better instructor. We all grew from it. We got better. And they actually tried to hire me for their training program. And it was one of the better no's, I said, because it opened a different door. And it was better for them too, because one of their guys stepped up and became a better instructor who was my assistant instructor. So now I've created a lineage with that gun range. So I think that's a good way to grow it at a smaller level when you first get started,
Heck yeah. Every facet that you just said. Absolutely.
It's guerrilla marketing, right? I mean, let's be honest.
It really is.
It is.
Well, no, but also and you said this earlier, that humility is really important to you. And all throughout that explanation, you're talking about something where it's the question is, how do you promote yourself? And at the very core of how you answered that question, you didn't use the word humility, but you spoke it in every word you said. And that is the best promotion you could possibly do, is be a genuine person and be a good instructor, and people want to join in on your classes and not even just join in on your classes, but participate in your life and be a part of it,
Yeah, my repeat business is huge. And half of it's because of my wife. She's an extrovert. Man, you meet Shelly, you get a hug. That's how it is, and she's wonderful that way. And she's kind and she's outgoing and she's warm. And, and I'm intuitive and analytical and a good breacher of combinations of what we do. And together we make a really good team. So I can never say it was me. I have a higher level of women in my classes, and it's not because of me, it's because of her. She opens opportunities, and the same thing with the gun store, it opens opportunities. So I think it's really, none of us can do this alone. It's incredibly hard. I can't imagine how much work Matt put into his event. That's a big deal. We host a little one. It's a lot of work, herding instructors, getting all the supplies set up, getting the venue, answering the endless questions that you've already put out. That is a lot of work. And even doing these podcasts is. So, I'm as grateful as I can be that he invites me on, because we're serving each other. We have a synergistic relationship right now. He needs good content from me, and I need a venue to speak from.
Very true.
Yep. So thank you.
No, thank you. Okay. Here's the horrible, boring, crappy question. What insurance considerations have you had to make as an instructor?
Well, I don't think this one is nearly as boring as anybody else is going to think it. Look, I started from force on force because I entered the firearms training market teaching a course that was the Complete Combatant. And it was from the first signs of danger to the legal aftermath. So there was force on force involved. Force on force insurance is difficult. Now, we weren't doing simunitions, so it was interesting. My martial arts insurance would cover it. As long as we're using, practice, like blue guns or cert pistols, everything was fine. They didn't care about that. So it was martial arts insurance that got me through the force on force. Now, as far as teaching and liability, I've gone through a couple of them, And the most important thing for a traveling instructor is, the COIs. We need certificates of insurance because almost all ranges ask for that. And thankfully, a guy that pretty good friends with, Brian Eastridge, he just said to me, hey man, if you tried FTA Protect, and it was easy because they offer an endless number of certificate of insurance at no extra cost, where the other ones, it's $25 every time I go to a range. So say I travel 30 times this year, we're talking about, $750 in insurance cost. So that's huge. And an instructor needs to put that into their lesson and understand what they're paying for. Liability insurance is incredibly important. You must have it. And you must have some sort of waiver. It's really important. And you must emphasize safety, because what the insurance is telling you is that if you don't teach a safe program, and there is no real safety, what we're doing is managing risk, then you're going to be losing this amount of money. It's possible in your life to lose this amount of money, which is a horrible thing. I don't have any guaranteed immunity from this if I make a mistake in class. So insurance to me is once again telling me how important it is to keep people present and how to teach a better class, and to make sure that I'm squared away as an instructor, and make sure that I can provide what the range needs. Because once again, the interface between the range, if you want to get hosted and you can't provide insurance, or you hem and haw, you're not going to get asked back. And I think that's really important to be squared away with that. Get with an insurance company I like FTA. They do a great job for me. Steve Moses is a shooter. They're all shooters over there. And they make it easy for me to do my job, and then to make the range feel good about my job. And then it reminds me to be a better instructor, because, man, putting a $2 million policy on the table is a big deal, And I got to tell you, teaching firearms is fairly safe compared to mixed martial arts, but it really is. I mean, the injuries that I've seen in mixed martial arts are incredible. I've seen emergency tracheotomies. I've seen spiral fractures of the tibia and the fibia. I've seen people knocked unconscious and then later die in the hospital. It's incredible. And the insurance is signed the night of your fight. And then if you don't tell the doctor you're injured, they don't cover you the next day. So that's how important insurance is. So I'm pretty big about this. And then I've worked a couple of cases as an expert witness that worked around martial arts and commissions. And man, if you don't get squared away with your insurance and think about all these things that could happen to you, they're going to come at you in a legal manner that's going to be horrific. And it's horrifying. And then everybody's going to question what you're going to do. They're going to hire somebody like me to pick it apart. And it's a tough process. I highly recommend that you read some of Masad Ayyub's work, not only on the legal side, but the civil side of things that people face when they get in trouble with this, and be squared away as an instructor. It's important. It's incredibly important that you do this, because it'll allow you to teach better, and it'll allow you to have less risk in your life. See, it wasn't that boring.
No, it wasn't.
I think it's a good topic.
The topic,
yeah.
though.
Yeah.
But it's also a topic that I don't think a lot of people looking at becoming instructors even consider. Mm-mm. So, and there you go.
I've been to one class that actually talked about it. Tom Givens talks about it because he's been teaching forever, Yeah. And so if Evan or Tessah start teaching, how do they know that? How do they know to do the insurance side? They're going to find out.
Yeah, the first day, and okay, where's your certificate?
And they're going to go, I don't know.
Car insurance.
That's tough. That's not the way to learn. So keep that question.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So the next one, though, I'm thinking of removing, because it's so close to another question we had. What are the important things for instructors beyond curriculum?
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about a lot of those. And now, we've talked about risk management. I would, something besides curriculum is we all do a safety briefing that's incredibly boring. And we need to stop that because, listen, the rules are there to tell you what not to do, but they're also to tell you when to do it. So why don't we rephrase this? This is when you do these things, So if I use Cooper's rules, instead of saying all firearms are loaded, I tell them that when they approach something that's dangerous, they should do so with respect. It's the approach rule. So if I handed you a knife and said it was dull, you certainly wouldn't stab yourself to see if it's true. So how can we change the way that we teach, even something that's rote like this, to set a good example? So, never point at anything you're not willing to destroy. Well, where's your attention? That's what that rule really tells you. If there's a bad guy in front of you, then it needs to be pointed at him. That's your context to do so. Otherwise, your attention needs to be fully on it. The interaction rule. When do I put my finger on the trigger and the sights on the target? Well, after I made the decision to shoot. And if I don't think I'm going to shoot, then I at an intermediate level of force where I might be holding a low ready and my finger's off the trigger. And if I'm not going to shoot, I shouldn't be pointing a gun at somebody. So let's give them the contextual relativity, how interesting these rules really are, because they're going to tell you when to do this right. The only one I have a real hard time with is be aware of your target and surroundings. I understand the nature it was offered in, but human beings simply don't work that way. We pay attention to one thing at a time. We have a very small foveal cone. It's 1 to 3 degrees that allows us to see clarity. Everything else is in the peripheral vision. If you try to look at one thing, the other thing will simply fade away. Hence the problems with iron sights. We can look at the front sight, but the back sight blurs and the target blurs. So can we be aware of our target and its surroundings? Yes, but only if we shift our awareness to the background. And if something drags at my awareness, then I need to stop doing what I'm doing and see what's going on. If I suddenly see motion behind the target, I need to ascertain what that is. I need to assess it at that time. So I think the skill levels of, how important these rules are can't be skipped, but they should be contextually live and vivid. And it should teach the people of the legal application of force and how to actually do what's most important, having muzzle discipline, trigger discipline, and making good decisions under pressure. So I think the next skill level for instructors is understanding the decisional mode of applying force, or when to shoot the target in competition. That's really important. And the sensation and perception that's relative to that. Because a lot of times we try to teach technical skills to fix a problem. So somebody will tell you, don't slap the trigger, which has never fixed anything in the history of teaching, I'm sure. What does it mean? I don't know, but I want you to stop doing it. All right. Well, what I ask people is, what is the sensation that leads you to do that? And they say, well, I feel a lot of pressure. And I say, well, what do you perceive that makes you feel pressured? And we all say there's 5 senses, but there's really about 15 senses for the human beings. And we won't get into all of them because that's boring. But one of them is time, the sense of time. So if you're an accuracy first shooter, you have a very good clock in your mind and you need to do something. And if I tell you to shoot quickly, you're really likely to convulse your whole hand to do it. So how can I stop you from doing that? Well, I can get you to pay attention to the perception of time and the sensation of tension. And then I can interrupt what you're doing and teach you how to relax your finger so that you can feel the trigger press. Get ahead of the problem instead of trying to correct it when it happens, because something in their decision told them to do this and it's reoccurring. And that's why technical solutions very seldom change people at a shooting level. They either have to have humiliating disappointments after time and just get back up and try something different, or somebody comes along or they read something that changes their mind about how they're thinking about that. Because, in fighting, I can't see somebody jab me. So if I'm standing in the ring, I can't see the jab. I can see what leads to the jab. I can see the postural shift. I can see all the pre-assault indicators because there's the same thing on the street. He's going to target glance. He's going to shift his weight. He's going to clench his fist. All right. He may even kind of look around before it because he's trying to snooker me out. So if I can get ahead of that, then I can predict that it's a jab and I can counter him. So as an instructor, you need to get to the very edge of prediction of what you're about to see, and then stop the students from doing that so they can exercise preemption instead of correction. And they will become better shooters in that moment. Now, it may not last forever and you'll have to come back and do it again, but that's how we get ahead of the problem is what is the perception, what is the sensation, and what causes you to make the same mistake over and over again instead of telling you not to do the same mistake. Because as soon as I say don't do something, I'm forming a visual image of you doing it. You're very likely to repeat it at that time. And it's called very poor coaching methodology, because don't tell people to stop doing things, show them how to do it the right way and get them to observe themselves, because the observation of yourself is really what shooting's about. You have to be totally present in the moment and see who you are and see what the truth is that's going on behind the actions, because, most of our thoughts are a very small part of who we are. There's an unconscious competence that's dictating how we move, how we think, how we feel. It's a known thing in law enforcement that you have to be careful with guys that come from alcoholic families when they deal with drunks. If you were abused as a child, you have to be very careful with dealing with child abusers, because it will hit you at an emotional level and you won't be able to hold yourself back. When I fought, if I fought somebody I particularly didn't like, it was much easier to be violent to them. And I recognized that as it led me astray in my decisional skills, because I do what? I try too hard to get to them. I'd swing too hard. I get too tense. I get too wound up, and I burn myself out instead of doing what? Well, just paying attention to this current skill set I have and applying that by paying attention to him and her. So I think that's a lot that we don't talk about in shooting. That's way above the shooting grade, because technical is a big part of teaching, but so is psychological and so is physiological. And if you don't address the other two, how are your students going to get better right now? All right, I rambled. I got on that.
No.
That's a favorite.
That was. I predict there's going to be some long conversations about that one segment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Evan.
I appreciate what you said just about when you are almost too passionate about something, regardless of what it is, the goal that you're trying to meet, where for the example that you gave was fighting somebody that you didn't like, and this sounds somewhat disjointed, but it's the ice lake example that I just heard about earlier, where you fixate almost too much on the thing that you want, and you step out onto the ice lake without even realizing that it's cracking. So, and that, I think that sort of has some application to finding a solution to a problem that isn't just a technical solution, or helping students attain a goal without breaking other fundamentals in that process. So, I was just over the past couple of weeks, I've been working on draw speed a lot, and I finally hit the draw time that I wanted. And then I watched the video back and I realized pretty much every fundamental in that draw was destroyed. not how I wanted it to be. And I talked to an instructor about that, and he didn't give the ice lake example, but just after thinking about it, he was like, you want it too badly almost that you are just willing to destroy all of the fundamentals to get it. Whereas he could have just said the technical solution of, well, stop doing this and this and this. Okay, well, I've heard that 100 times before, and I'm still here,
There's a struggle release that's really important. So whenever I hear a client tell me they're frustrated and they're angry, I'm like, good. Because that anger is meant to change something. It heats you up and it changes your shape, and if you don't care enough to get angry about you doing something wrong, then I can't help you either. If you're a little frustrated with what you're doing, you're going to struggle with it. And as soon as you let go of that struggle, you'll get the very thing you wanted. But as long as you chase the very thing you want, you're living in the future instead of the present. So, like when you're working on draws and you see your fundamentals fall apart, were you working on speed and efficiency, or were you working on accuracy and precision? If it's speed and efficiency and I didn't get my support hand there, then I simply recognize that. I correct it without emotion. I say, all right. And then I visualize my support hand getting on the gun sooner. And I guarantee, like, if that's the problem, in 3 repetitions, you'll have it, because you programmed yourself to do what you want to do, instead of chastising yourself and worrying about you're never going to get there and trying to develop your technique, because that unemotional correction is the most important thing we can do. And we talked about that in failure, letting go. And I imagine Evan, just watching him, he speaks quietly, but I think there's a real reservoir of desire and determination inside of him, is what I see. And he wants to get better, and he wants it right now, and it's hard when it doesn't come up. And then what's the first thing you start thinking about? Something's wrong with me. Everybody else can do it, but I can't. And it's weird. Like, I've been working on my draw just like you have, on demand, under pressure. I have a very good 1-second draw. That's performance mode. Now, demonstration, I can do a 0.9 all day from concealment. All right. But I stopped caring about it because I reached the goal of whatever I thought it was. Now I demonstrate in class and I say, all right, I'm going to go really fast so you can see what that looks like too when I'm pushing and I'm trying. So suddenly I started hitting 0.8s from concealment. Wow. But it was a surprise to me. It was a surprise to them. And then the other day I'm teaching and I hit 3.75s, but I wasn't trying for that. It's because my body won't tolerate inefficiency. And now I'm no longer getting in the way. And I'm letting this wonderful system, my nervous system and my brain program me for the success that I wanted, because I just held that goal in my head. And now I've let go of the struggle. And I'm simply putting myself on the spot and performing better than I ever have in my life. And that's what you got to do. And if you don't practice enough, you never get to that. So you quit pretty early in the process. So good for you, Evan. There's another coach talk, wasn't it?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sorry. I feel like that's such a perfect example of going to a firearms class and like learning things about yourself as a person. Like, sure, I learned how to shoot a gun better and I feel great about that. But like you talked about unemotional correction. And like that was the major takeaway I took from my very first firearms class was all of the negative self-talk I was willing to put in my own brain when I was the like very first class I'd ever taken. Everybody else has run like a test and standards, John Johnston. And I got really in my head and, you know, he noticed that and corrected that, you know, don't talk to yourself that way. Would you let me talk to you the way you're talking to yourself? And that, I mean, even still, I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned in this last year and a bit of shooting is correcting yourself without emotion and just being honest with yourself and moving forward from there.
You know, it's interesting what you said too, is, you know, if you're criticizing yourself and performing a skill, you've bifurcated your attention no matter what. It's like there's two of you in your head. Okay. So how can you be good at what you're doing? If I correct myself by either visualizing or feeling what I need to feel, and it's different for different people. You know, like if you're having a grip issue, I want you to visualize feeling the grip, how it's going to feel in your hands. It's very interesting. Some people can feel colors. I know that sounds really woo-woo, but it's scientifically proven that they can actually sense the color that they're touching. We have so many senses that we have not tapped into, but talking to ourselves is probably the least effective of them all. I'm not a big fan of neuro-linguistic programming. Tried it a lot in the 90s. It didn't yield results with it. But if you visualize what you want and then you feel the sensation of what you're about to do, and you just put that in your head without putting it into the fight or flight response, you instantly correct yourself. And now we've used a microcosm of skills, which is a cool word. We're living in a little bit of universe of shooting or martial arts to recognize who we are. And now we have a bit of control over how we respond to things in our life. And you'll recognize that pattern of behavior in everything you do. And you simply can become a better person by recognizing that I constantly criticize myself to no avail. And I'm going to stop doing that. And I'm going to take the actions that I need to. I'm going to visualize what I want to do. If I get frozen, I'll take a deep breath and get after it. And I will become a better person by simply acting upon that instead of having this conversation in my mind of either the worst coach I ever had or the worst parent or some bifurcated personality that I put up there that tells me I can't do things, because there is no doubt that that will hold you back more than anything in life. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then it's the whole world against nobody, because you're not even fighting for yourself. And you've got to learn to stand up for yourself in your own mind and say, I can do these things. Maybe not right now, but I will do those things. And that's awesome that you got to that point. And John's a really good instructor with that. And it's something he struggled with too, I'm sure. You know, you can recognize it when you do it yourself.
Number 11.
Wow.
Yes. What issues have you run into as an instructor that you had not considered prior?
So this is a difficult question because I've been teaching so long. So I've run into a lot of issues in my life, and I really actually enjoy the challenge of issues. You know, so whatever challenge comes my way, I want to try to overcome that and adapt. And oftentimes I don't do a good job. But But, the one thing I found that's very interesting in the firearms world is we're still living in the age of personality instruction.
Yeah.
We did it. Yeah, we did it in martial arts where, when I started in the 70s, my instructor had a stars and stripes, gi on, no sleeves, a mullet in the back, looks a lot like Master Ken does. That was exactly my instructor. And that's how we all lived. And whatever he said, you did. There was no criticism of that. And it was his personality. And that's how we taught. And I see that a lot in the firearms industry. And I didn't expect that because, modern coaching has been around forever. Lanny Basham wrote a book about this with winning in mind. And that's just coaching methodology. We use it in other sports, but there's a real hesitancy in firearms to equate anything to a sport in the tactical world, despite the high level operators getting a lot of training from top competitors. But what we're really talking about is the psychology of performance under pressure. And that's what I feel is lacking sometimes. How do we address that with students? And how do we teach from principle instead of personality? It's got to be principle-based instruction. And principle means that there's an understanding, a truth of what you're doing. And you saying it is simply not enough. We actually have to be able to demonstrate the principle. And it has to work with a wide range of people instead of just special picked ones. So that was it's been a hard challenge for me. And I always, as you guys can tell, I say what I'm thinking, and I seek the truth, and I don't care where it is, and I change my mind frequently about it. And the truth is the most important thing. And sometimes it's horrifying what the truth really is because I find out how wrong I am. But I also will speak out when I think something else is going against that, and it's not serving. I don't want to say the greater good. It's not serving the client. It's not serving success. And being a deconstructionist and a truth seeker will get you kicked out of about every organization in the world. It's a hard way to go because you're always looking and improving on that. And I'm just kind of, I think firearms is hitting the UFC level right about now. Scott Jelinski is a perfect example. Scott was a mortgage broker before he came into this. He's by far one of the most successful firearms instructors in America. And he's created some fantastic shooters, not only in USPSA, but tactically, and he knows his lane and he figured out a place and he got really good at it. And nobody would have said a mortgage broker is going to kick everybody else in, so it's interesting that we're still kind of stuck with that because the UFC shook it up for martial arts. You had to prove that your stuff worked. You had to do it under pressure. And it is as close as fighting as you're ever going to get. I don't care if you talk about eye gouging because we all do it all the time in the ring. It's an accident. We get kicked in the groin. The only thing you don't have is multiple opponents. You do have a rule set, but it's very vague, and you get to use all these different styles. And now 40 years later, we no longer argue about where our fist goes. This was a big argument. Should be this way, should be this way, should be this way. It doesn't matter. People get knocked out in all those positions. We don't argue whether wrestling works. We know it really works now. We know jiu-jitsu is important. We know that the Pareto principle really applies to teaching is 20% of the inputs will yield 80% of the successes. So I've been kind of shocked. That's been hard for me as an issue to find a lot of people really stuck in that kind of old school teaching still. I'm the master, you do as I say. It's refreshing when I meet people that are outside of that. I think it's really changing now. And there's a lot of young, promising instructors coming up. Chris Seipert, great thinker, great writer. It's exactly what we need, but he also unassailable from the military background. Tim Herron, grandmaster, champion shooter, passionate instructor. He's one of those rare combinations that can teach and perform. What a wonderful thing is, all these guys are coming forward and filling in a gap that was missing. So, maybe you two are the next two that are going to do the same thing. I don't know if you're interested in that, but it's really interesting. And I think the one thing that's really missing right now, and it misses in martial arts all the time, is women teaching at a high level. It's not encouraged the way it should be. It's not worked upon. It becomes, shooting for women becomes more of a social activity than it does a performance thing. Because guys are really about things. Women are about people. It's a very generalization, but it's the truth of the matter. If we look at Matt's wall, he likes things. They're awesome, right? And we like to make connections. So what I hope to see next is more different instructors coming out. I think that's a big issue right now, so that more people can be drawn into shooting sports, because let's be honest, man, shooting is fun. It's a great activity. Our little primitive minds, we love shooting. All right. All sports are hunting activities. Chase the ball around. That's chasing prey. Do it in a cooperative manner, or the war activities like martial arts. That's how we got better to be warriors. So we love this sort of activity, love to be alive. So I think that's a big issue that has been surprising, because I feel like I've gone back 40 years, but maybe I'm the good herald to bring in some of this information and get people thinking in using some of the scientific methods that are available now, doing some reading outside of actual shooting. And I think it'll help the performance in the long run.
What do you see as what is your advice to future instructors?
Start teaching.
Yeah, do it.
Do it. Don't hesitate. Find a place. If you can find a good training community, start helping. That can be competitive. Being an RSO is a great way to start too. You get to see a lot of people handle guns and be a competition and start recognizing that. But the most important thing is, if you feel the calling to do this, don't allow your false humility to hold you back. Because if something's calling you strongly to help other people, then all you have to do is go acquire those skills. But if you say, I'm not ready, which is the number one thing I heard in martial arts, is I'm not ready. I want to get in shape before I start training, which I just inverted to, I'm not coming ever. It's an excuse. And when you say I'm not ready, what you're really saying is, I'm not accepting of the challenge being put in front of me. As soon as you challenge yourself and you recognize that, hey, listen, I need to work on this, and this, you can do it. Today I looked at the Khan Academy. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's free university online. When I became a precision shooter, my mathematical skills were really lacking, so I took math classes there. It's free. It's a wonderful thing. I can get any knowledge I want. I looked through it today. They have all sorts of, instruction programs and how to be a better leader and things like that. It's really interesting. You can fill in these gaps really quickly, but simply decide to do it and then go find a place where you can do a little of it. Don't try to open up your own training company right away. If you can find somebody to apprenticeship with, please do that. I have people all the time. I've got a guy shadowing me right now. He really wants, and he's not a young man. I mean, he's in his 40s, but he's like, I'm here to learn what you do, and I'm going to pay for that by helping you on the range. And I was like, that's a perfect symbiotic relationship for both of us. And, we have deep talks more than we do about, hey, do this, do that, and do this. He proposes things. I ask questions about what he saw. I ask him how he'd help somebody perform, and you get better at it. And it's not that hard of a process. I think just get after it. Decide it. If it calls to you, don't hesitate. Life will slip away like that. And, before you know it, you're 56 years old and you're talking about this stuff that you've been doing your whole life. And, if I hadn't started at 13 learning and 17 teaching, I couldn't talk the way that I do 40 years later. If I'd waited until I was Grandmaster Black Belt, or I become the world championship of martial arts, I probably wouldn't be teaching at all. I go do it, get after it.
One thing I found along those same exact lines were something about having a concept or an idea, and no, I'm not going to present that. No. And then someone else presents it, and it's like, oh, that was amazing. I should have done something. Don't put it off. Just go and do it. If you have a unique angle that you're going to present, go do it.
Comes down to being fearless too, right? The word fearless doesn't mean an absence of fear. It means to have less fear. So fear is the thing that holds us back. And if we're afraid of doing something, then that's the very thing we should go after, because that speaks to a place that we can improve upon. So don't let fear hold you back from doing what's right. And if you make mistakes, it's okay, because Lord knows I made some horrible mistakes. And the things that I originally taught, I don't teach in the same way or a different way, but I don't regret those, because they actually set me up for success. Yeah. And I needed those lessons. So put yourself out there. You'll be all right. Be courageous.
So along those same lines, if you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently?
I would have paid attention in school.
Yeah,
that would have been a good start for me. So, I mean, I have a very rebellious personality anyway, because that's why I went into law enforcement. I do. I have a very rebellious personality. My poor wife, she suffers with it all the time. So I had to really find my own path. And the thing that I would have done sooner is recognize relationships that were bad for me. I stuck to people and I cleaved to them because they were authority figures and I respected them, even though the things they were doing to me were incredibly damaging. And what I've learned now is it's okay to separate. It's okay to move on. It's okay to have a lesson with an instructor for 1 day or 1 year or 10 years. And sometimes you outgrow each other. So move on, because you have to recognize why people are doing things. And if it's to make themselves better, then they're using you. And you can't do that. You have to respect yourself enough not to get caught in that. And I got caught a lot in that because I respected the person and I wanted to please them. And I got some really hard lessons in my life. And sometimes I still continue to learn those, but I'm much better at recognizing when it happens and setting a boundary. Because if you set a boundary with somebody and they don't respect it, you have all the information you need to have in your life. So I think that's really, that's the thing I would change. Coming out of an abusive household, I would have gotten counseling sooner because it was helpful, and guys don't like to talk about that, but PTSD from any traumatic event means you relive it over and over and over again, and it affects your present life forever. And it also may create a cycle of it again. So I would have gotten help sooner, but I wasn't ready for that. And I would have found somebody that I could have trusted to ask me what I needed to do. If I could ask them questions about what I needed to do sooner. That didn't come until I had far less testosterone in my system. I didn't have that group. But otherwise, I think I've done a pretty good job from where I came from, and I look backwards and I'm pretty satisfied. It's been a really weird, circuitous course, but it's been a hell of a journey. It's been a great adventure. And those mistakes have helped me become a better instructor. And they help me help other people in this, because I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of people that come and learn shooting skills are going through traumatic events in their life, either now or have before or expecting it to happen. So, they're looking at you as a clearinghouse or an auditor to help them move on. And, getting somebody to believe in themselves is the first thing in personal protection. So that's what I would recommend. I think that's the one thing I would change if I could.
That's good advice.
It's funny that you mentioned paying attention in school more. And I think you brought up before that you didn't do very well in school either, or that you didn't, maybe you said you didn't enjoy it. I'm the same way. I hated high school and I hated college. I hated learning. And now I just am a sponge. I mean, I would learn while I'm sleeping if I could. So it's just interesting.
Change that. So what changed that for you? What got you to change that? Is it because it's... Go ahead.
I think what it really was I found some things in life that I was really passionate about. Mm-hmm. But then when I started to learn about those things, then I started to learn that I just like learning in general, as long as it's a topic that at least interests me to some extent. But, I don't think anybody has ever said, I can't stand how much knowledge I have. I wish I had less. I don't think anybody's ever said that before.
Mm-mm. Yeah, that self-direction is really important. Being curious about what you're doing, being passionate, having a purpose, reaching for mastery, and all of it being your own idea is really important in life. And that's what happens. And I think school is especially hard on a certain type of person that likes to move and do things, because they make you sit still and they lecture you, and then you don't learn particularly well. And here's the funny thing is they actually tested me. They took an IQ test of me to see if I had a learning disability, because I wasn't doing well in school. And this is, 80s. They didn't know about, bad stuff going on, or they didn't want to know about it. And, I was just acting out because I was having a rough home life, and I had nobody to tell me school is important. So I came to school and I read books. And when I knew I was different because of that is they did a big reading test in the high school, and they announced the highest reading level. So it was comprehension, rate of reading, and vocabulary. And I dominated 2 out of the 3. And they announced my name, and everybody in my class did this. because I was failing out of school, which is just crazy, and all I had to do was decide that I wanted to be there and I wanted to do a better job because I was going anyway. I went every day and I read books. So why didn't I just pay attention? So I'm with you, Evan. I'm with you, man. It's hard, but once you make that adaptation and it's your stuff, you're good to go.
So I think this is Tess's question here. What's one thing that you've changed your mind about in the last 5 years?
Everything.
Okay.
You only get to pick one. To pick one.
Well, something that would be definitely instructional. Just recently I've changed my mind about grip. Since we're talking about firearms, I've changed my mind about grip. I'm teaching it differently. I spent a lot of time researching grip because I really didn't like the orthodoxy of grip as it was being taught. There's really only 3 motions of the hand. There's the carry grip where we do pull-ups, deadlifts, or carry all the groceries. There's the pinch, which we pick up a pin or throw a football. So neither one of those really apply. And then I'd hear a lot of people talking about grip strengthening. And I was like, well, we learned in jiu-jitsu that doesn't really work. Captains of crush has nothing to do with shooting. It's not the same mechanical motion as gripping a gun. You're gripping your hand's much further open. So it just shows that very strong people can move that and therefore they have a good grip, but it may not be the right training orthodoxy for you. So that didn't work. Scott's wave grip made a lot of sense because they're rotating cogs. And then I realized mostly grip was taught from the end state of the shooting instead of the during of shooting, the flow state of shooting. So there was not a lot going on there. And I realized that people didn't realize that the body was really involved in gripping. So, postural stability was just as important in the shoulders. The 4 muscles that we call the rotator cuff is what holds your arm still. It's not the grip. And then that people didn't really understand that, the force was going backwards, but being demonstrated by an upward position. So I changed just about everything about posture and grip continuously until I can teach people to do it right for them. And I found a pretty good way to do that now, with a different system of teaching it. So I've really changed my mind about that. And then, even trigger mechanics, I go back and forth as a precision shooter, triggers everything. And then I shoot fast and triggers nothing. So I was like, something's inside of that. And I have to figure out how to teach that better. And I've been watching a lot of people press triggers under pressure that are really good marksmen. And then I've been watching people that shoot really fast and how they move their fingers. And so I changed my mind about that too. And I got to tell you, it's just, if I haven't changed my mind about something in the last 3 days, something's wrong with me. Because I tell this story in class, you can be certain and you can be right, but you can never be both. And if you are, you're probably wrong at that point. If I certainly know how to do something 100% and I know it's the right way, it's probably going to change, because this is a living, adapting thing. And so I try not to be 100% certain about anything, because then that keeps me from directing my learning to it and getting to be a better instructor. If I believe this is the only way to do it, then I'm done. And that's the end of it. And now we just all do it over and over until you get it right, but simply not the same. And I imagine Tessah and I have very different hands, right? Very different. And the way that she grips the gun and what she's feeling, but there's no reason she can't shoot the gun well. Newtonian physics say that that's entirely possible without having, captains of Crush 2 to do it. So we've seen people like Jesse Harrison, reach Grandmaster stage. So how I teach something means that I can't be certain of it. And I can't know that it's 100% right. So I want to change my mind all the time, because otherwise I'm stubborn. And once I become stubborn, I shut the filters down and I don't get new information. So never believe you got the end product. I'm sure if I get one last word, it'll be like, use your pinky more, something. I don't know. I was wrong about all this. I don't know, but that's living as an instructor. Just don't hesitate to change direction and explore it and experiment, because we're clinicians. We're watching people do stuff and we're getting information at a rate that's almost not processable for us. And so I'm changing my mind all the time on how I'm doing stuff, and it keeps it alive, keeps it interesting. And I can't wait to practice.
And that's just part of being a perpetual student.
It is.
how would you recommend people vet their instructors?
So let's go about this at a different rate. What is your goal? That's the first thing you need to establish. What do you want to learn? Don't worry about who's recommended who. What do you want to learn? If you go to the wrong person, it can be damaging, even though they're a great instructor, because they take you off the path of what you want to learn. So I think for the initial person is set a goal. So am I going to carry a firearm for self-defense? All right. So what would be my goals? Well, I need to have a good draw. I need to be able to hit the target. I need to know what to do before and after. I need to understand pre-assault indicators. I need to know what my legal rights are, when I could use force. So that's a very different set of topics. And then, it's possible that I may be injured in that fight, so I may learn some medical. And then your goals broaden as you start training. So then you're like, well, I need to do some retention work. So, because somebody could take the gun away from me. I've watched John Korea's videos over and over. So I've seen 35,000 ways that this could go wrong. So I learned how to model and improve. So set a good set of goals of what you want to learn. If you're going to be a competitive shooter, find a good competition shooter. If you're going to be a tactical or personal protection shooter, find somebody that does that well. And then later, if you want to do both, you can blend them pretty easy. But it's really important for you to know what you want. And then as you vet instructors, if you can't find some sort of presence on social media and listen and hear them and see them teach, I would hesitate to go to that person, because every one of us is putting our stuff out there so you can see us. And then if it's very aggrandizing to them about how good they are, that's a big warning signal. I would avoid that at all costs. And then the final thing is ask people that have been to class or read the reviews. The reviews are very telling, not in what they say, but when they don't say. Had a great time, learned a lot, heard some really cool stories. Well, what did that person say? They enjoyed their time there. They learned a lot, but they couldn't define it. And they heard a lot of stories. So they were really there to share the person's past glories and live off of that and enjoy that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you hear somebody say, oh my God, this changed the way I think about shooting, and I was able to perform at a higher level, those sort of reviews really help you. And I think it's easier to vet instructors than ever before. If they don't have a list of credentials on their page and they haven't done anything recently, that's also a big warning flag. And then the final thing I'll say is look for the type of people in their class. If you don't see somebody like you in their class, they may not be for you, because you're not in the right class at that point. So, and listen, I'm not putting anybody down when I say that. I'm just saying some people are better at teaching law enforcement people, and some people are better at shooting guys and teaching guys that want to do USPSA. And some people interact better with women, and some people teach children better, and some people teach a lot of people well. And watch how their facial expressions and body languages is as that person coaches them, because that'll tell you everything you need to know. Because if you don't like the person, you will lean away from them. So if you see most of the class leaning away from an instructor when they're talking, that's a big warning sign right there. And if you don't see them interacting, and not that you got to be smiley, because I say horrible things to people in a very eloquent, direct manner, and they're not sure if they've been what just happened. But I'm very direct when I teach, because there's no time. So, and then they realize it's what I say. I don't say it with emotion. I just say, here's what I observed. And then we work on it together, and then they get success. And eventually, if I did my job, they're going to feel like I wasn't there. They're not going to feel like Brian did this. They're going to feel like they did this, So, and that's when you see repeat customers a lot. I love coming to this class. I enjoyed it. So be careful, vet your instructors, because it's important. And when you're first out, you don't know how to vet anybody. You're just like 100 people went there and it was really cool. And I took a couple classes early, and I think about the things that we did at a low level in those classes, and I am horrified. And I'm sure Matt can relate to this, because, in the 90s when we were training, man, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on, with shooting, and we took risks that just simply were unacceptable and didn't have to happen. But I felt really cool because I did it with him, and I'm a risk taker by heart. And I look back on it, I was like, man, that really wasn't the class to start with. But, so there's my ideas for vetting instructors.
feel like you gave some really unique insights, like things that I mean, obviously things that I wouldn't have thought of, but also like things that we haven't heard yet. We haven't done a lot of these episodes yet, but things like posture of their students, like leaning away, and also, you know, looking at who is taking their classes and whether or not there's a level of diversity there, because that paints a picture for us. If there's diversity in their students, that means that there's diversity in their teaching, and they can teach multiple different kinds of people. So yeah, I took a ton away from that. That was awesome. Thank you.
I also like what you said about reading the reviews, because it might seem obvious, but you know, I like what you said about what the reviews aren't mentioning. So, you know, taking the training aspect out of it for a minute, if I go on Amazon and I see a product that I want to buy and the reviews are, you know, the average is 4.9 stars. And then I scroll through them and all the 5-star reviews are, works great, looks good, you know, whatever. And then there's a couple 1-star reviews where people say, well, I bought it to do X and it's doing Y, but it's not doing X, or, you know, fell apart in the first week or whatever. Those reviews are a lot more telling than the ones that just say works great, you know? So, and it's the same thing for instructors, I think. I mean, the less that the review says seems the more troubling to me. I mean, you know, and I see it online all the time where people will post on Facebook and say, went to this training this week and it was great. The instructor was awesome. And then I ask, well, what did you learn? What made it awesome? And then they don't have an answer, you know? Oh, well, yeah. I really like shooting there. It was fun. Okay. Well, do you have any takeaways from the class that, you know, really improved your shooting, or did you just have fun? Because, you know, having fun is good, but you mentioned before about time and money, which are the two most valuable things to a lot of people. I can have fun doing other things that cost less time and money.
Yeah.
It was because of After Action Reports. I hosted Pat Rogers numerous times, and it was a combination of his own and then also the students. And it was a great way to determine, I like what this guy's about. I like what his values are. I like what his focus is. I want to host him. And because of him, he was a big influential figure in how primary and secondary started. So, yeah.
What did everybody call him too? Uncle Pat, right?
Oh yeah, he is Uncle Pat.
Because he's a part of the family.
Yeah.
You know, that's when your nickname is Uncle, that's a big deal. You know, and how many people did he influence in the firearms industry?
Oh, everyone.
Yeah, everyone. So,
is there anything that you feel is pertinent that we neglected to cover?
You know, I'm sure I'm going to wake up at about 3 a.m. and go, yeah, I know the answer to this, because that's what's pertinent right there. Is that thought is, as we have these conversations, they will fall into our subconscious and they will percolate. And as we think and as we grow and as we sleep, we're going to have further questions on this. And I see this, I think the thing that you're doing right now is really like a living testament of instructors. And I think by the time you get to 20 or 30 of these, it will have evolved greatly. So the one thing that we always have to keep in mind is this is an evolution.
Yes.
And what we're all doing is it's synergistic. And the more we all bring to it, the better it is. And I think the questions are really well thought out. It's an interesting set of questions that I don't usually get, which is good, which led me off to a lot of other little side topics, you know, and so I think this is a good job. And I especially, I think Evan and Tessah are a great choice for this because, it reminds me once again to stay out of lingo and terminology, and to speak in a way that relates to other people, and to realize that we exclude people by not using the right language, because language is a virus. And once you think about it, every time you say something to somebody, you're infecting them with an idea, you're infecting them with a concept. So the language of this show is very open and it's about learning, and it's about information. It's about growing. And, the thing that I'm going to take away from it is to be careful, because I have a love of words, but to make sure that my message is clear and to speak as just a regular person would each time, to make sure. And I always try to do that in my class, but God, it's hard not to fall back into it. You don't even realize you're saying AIWB and person's looking at you and going, what? AbWeb? What's that? And we just fall into these things. And then sometimes I know things or people or ideas, and I need to explain those well. So great show. And I think that was really, I don't think we're missing anything, but it did teach me something to be careful as I speak,
Awesome.
Yeah. Tim talked about that last week, about speaking in a manner that resonates with your students. Mm-hmm. So, if you're just going to teach a class with beginners, you can go in there and make yourself look like you really know what you're talking about using a bunch of acronyms and all this different stuff, but they don't know what you're talking about. So, and that happened to me the other day. I was talking to one of my friends about something, and I mentioned something about force on force, but I was just texting him and I said FOF, and he was like, I don't know what that is. So happens all the time,
My mother-in-law thought LOL meant lots of love.
Wait a minute, it doesn't?
It led to some really weird things. Like we're like, hey, we had this bad thing happen, and she's like, oh, LOL. And we're like, what? What? But every group gets their own language because it's a shorthand. Doctors use Latin, so do lawyers, so do shooters, and you can't avoid that. Well, there's going to be a shorthand, but what you have to do is not exclude people by the shorthand, to make sure that when you use the shorthand that you explain why it's important and relevant to what they're doing, and include them in the group instead of exclude them by speaking that way. Jiu-jitsu is by far the most confusing language for anybody who doesn't take it to speak. It's god awful. I could have a whole conversation with somebody. In fact, poor AJ Zito sat at the table with me and Scott Jelinski and just looked at both of us, and he's like, I don't know what either one of you just said, And then once again, I took a friend of mine and I excluded him by, not speaking in the language or explaining what I'm saying. So I think that's really a cool way. And I love the idea that language is a virus. I don't know who I stole that from. I would attribute him if I could, but that's a really cool way to think about it. And it infects us as we talk with each other. So
I think another piece of that to note too is that, like you said, those things are going to come out, like those words are going to come out. You kind of revert to them. And I think creating a culture in a class that allows the students to ask questions when they have them, and obviously within reason. But I've been able to, attend classes where asking questions is totally welcomed. And so when something like AIWB gets thrown out there, or FOF, I can be like, what? And then I can learn, so it can be a learning opportunity as well, as long as it's not in excess.
Yeah. The Socratic method is really the way, that I teach. I ask a lot of questions, so I encourage other people to ask questions. Now I'm going to talk about questions for just a second. When they say there are no stupid questions, there are questions that manipulate and control, though. So I become very aware of people that are controlling class because either they're not paying attention, they want to slow it down, so they want further details, which is a real common tactic. We call it stalling. Like if you're competing, you say, okay, shooter, are you ready? And they say, I don't know. That's horrifying to hear. So that's a correction for me to talk to that person about. Sometimes they're trying to tell me all the stuff they know. That's what they use questions for. So what do you think about Hicks law and decisional drills? So they're trying to tell me how much they know. So I'm very aware of what questions are for. And as long as they're sourcing information and they keep the class rolling and they don't distract from the environment, I try to phrase my questions in such a way to set an example. And then I move on as quickly as I can from them. So I think there's a real balance with questions, and I don't discourage them in any way, but I do try to watch for the manipulative questions that are failing the rest of the class, because, guys like to tell stories. You let that one guy talk and he'll never stop. So I get him early in the class and I say, hey, listen, I'll be glad to get back to your question. I'm going to answer it later in the class. Whether I do or not, sometimes I don't, but
Funny enough, we addressed that in the last episode, and Tim Herron called those people assholes.
Yes.
So, Evan or Tessa, do you have any alibi questions?
Lots of notes.
Lots of notes.
Yeah, lots of notes.
2 last questions. Number 18, because the alibi one does not count. Brian, will your instruction get someone killed on the streets?
Hopefully I get the bad guy killed in the streets. So yes. No, it will not. But I will say this, you must make good decisions. No matter what anybody's teaching you, there's a huge argument going on the internet about the sub-second draw and whether it should be taught or not. Listen, that's a training methodology that's very limited to deliberate practice, and it's on the speed and efficiency side. And then accuracy and precision's on the other side. And then there's performance methodologies. What you simply have to do is, if you don't want to get killed in the streets, you need to start recognizing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and checking yourself before you wreck yourself, because that's what's going to happen with everybody. And I will take no responsibility for that, but I will take responsibility for all the information that I provide. And I have probably spent more time training, researching, and teaching than any one human being should. I use this in my introduction, but I have over 100,000 hours of teaching experience, which means if you started counting now, we'd be done sometime on Friday. Just counting to that. Imagine that time spent working on that. So anything that I say with any degree of certainty, there's also the caveat that you have to make a good decision in this case. So hopefully everybody will survive, and I can keep them away from the fight, because that's the best one you win.
The very last question. Where and how can people find you in person and online?
Thankfully, it's easy. My wife does a good job at all this. So it's the CompleteCombatant.com. All our social media is on there. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. I have my own Instagram account, which is Chief Chaos Controller, which the Julie Gullib gave to me. And I treasure that title. I think it's a cool title. So I run on that. I have a YouTube channel that I just give all this away, guys. It's all there. Claude is doing some work on my videos right now. And he said, do you know you have over 1,000 videos on your channel? That's a lot of me. I'm sorry. It is a lot of me, but you can find me there. I'm traveling the country. I'm booking a lot of classes, now and through next year. I still have a couple weekends open. So if you want to host me, I don't require big minimums to get a class started. I'm not the greatest known name, so I take a little pressure off the host with that. But, if you want me to come out, we teach several different things. Going to unveil I haven't come up with a name for it yet, but the Coaching Methodology class to help people teach better, to give them insights into all the things that I talked about so that they'll be better teachers. Then the Red Dot class, and then our image-based decisional drills, which is like field training for the armed citizen, where they start learning how to look deeply, recognizing pre-assault cues, and making good decisions under pressure. And they also learn how to tool cycle and what a cognitive stack feels like under pressure. And the really cool thing about that is there's an unintended consequence to it, where we're seeing altered perceptions that I can actually identify during class and say, listen, you just experienced time dilation. You had a color transference. I ask them to describe what the person was. And I know how bad eyewitness testimony is, but it's even worse than we thought. So it's very interesting. It's an interesting sidebar. It's a different way to train, and you add it to your dry practice and you really enjoy it. And I do an instructor's class for that also. And sometimes Shelly even gets to travel with me when we're not trying to build a house and take care of dogs. So please come see me. I'd love to work with you. And if not, I'll probably be in a class with you soon.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Great info. Great attitude too. Excited.
I'm going to go back through my notes with a highlighter pen or 6. Just a bunch of different colors.
Highlight everything.
Yeah, okay. Just get a paintbrush.
And if you guys have any questions, just reach out to me. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'm on the range, but I'd be glad to help any way I can. And if I don't have the answer, I'll be glad to send you in a direction at least source some material for you, whether it's books or Audible or videos or another instructor. And that's what we should be doing for each other. So if there's anything I can do to help you guys, please reach out to me. I'm glad to do so. And I hope to share some real time with you, face to face and person to person soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.